You know that feeling when you look at your bank account and for once, there's actually something left over? Maybe you got a raise. Maybe you've been grinding at that side thing. Or maybe you just finally got your spending under control. And for the first time in a while, you're not immediately stressed about where that money needs to go. But then comes the question that keeps you up at night. What do I actually do with this? Because now you're standing at this fork in the road. On one side, there's your mortgage, this massive debt hanging over your head, reminding you every single month that you owe someone hundreds of thousands of dollars. On the other side, there's investing, this thing everyone says you should be doing if you ever want to retire, if you ever want freedom. And here's what makes it so hard. Both choices feel urgent, both feel important, and you can't shake the feeling that whichever one you choose, you're somehow getting it wrong. So let me tell you where I think most of us get stuck with this. We treat this decision like it's purely mathematical, like there's some spreadsheet somewhere that'll just tell us the right answer if we plug in enough numbers. And yeah, the math matters, we'll get to that. But what we miss is that this isn't really about math at all. This is about fear. It's about that weight you mentioned, the one sitting on your chest when you think about owing someone all that money for the next 20, 30 years. It's about the anxiety of watching the stock market drop 10% in a week and wondering if you just threw your money away. It's about looking at your parents' generation and seeing how some of them paid off everything and slept peacefully, while others invested and retired early. And here's what nobody tells you. Both groups will swear they made the right choice. Because this decision isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening inside your life, with your salary, your job security, your family situation, your ability to handle risk, and honestly, your ability to sleep at night. What works for your friend, your co-worker, some guy on the internet, that might be completely wrong for you. And that's not a cop-out. That's just reality. Let me walk you through what's actually happening here, because once you see it clearly, this gets a lot less overwhelming. When you pay off your mortgage early, you're essentially making an investment. You're getting a guaranteed return equal to whatever your interest rate is. So, if you have a 4% mortgage and you pay it off, you're saving yourself 4% interest. That's your return. It's guaranteed, it's predictable, and psychologically, it feels incredible. I've watched friends do this. The look on their face when they make that final payment. It's not just relief, it's this deep sense of security. No one can take their house. Their monthly expenses just dropped dramatically. If they lose their job, they're not immediately panicking about the mortgage. There's something primal about that safety. Plus, and this is real, you're saving actual money. If you're paying a 4% interest rate on a $300,000 mortgage over 30 years, you're paying something like $215,000 in interest alone. That's not a small number. Paying that off early means keeping that money. But here's where it gets complicated. While you're putting every extra dollar toward that mortgage, the stock market is doing its thing. And historically, and I want to be really careful with how I say this because past performance doesn't guarantee future results, but historically, the stock market has returned around 10% annually over the long term. Some years more, some years less, sometimes it loses money. But averaged out over decades, that 10% number keeps showing up. So let's put that side by side for a second. Not to tell you what to do, but just so you can see what you're choosing between. If you have a 4% mortgage and you're paying it off, you're getting a guaranteed 4% return by avoiding that interest. If you invest that same money instead, and the market gives you its historical average, you're looking at potentially 10%. That's a 6% difference. Over 10, 20, 30 years? That difference compounds into real money. We're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. But, and this is crucial, that's only if the market cooperates. That's only if you can stomach watching your investments drop 20%, 30% some years, and not panic sell. That's only if you have the discipline to keep investing consistently. And honestly, that's only if you can emotionally handle carrying debt while you invest. Because here's what I've learned watching people navigate this. Some people cannot sleep knowing they owe money. It doesn't matter if the math says they should invest. The emotional weight of debt is too heavy. And you know what? That's completely valid. Your mental health, your peace of mind, your ability to function without constant financial anxiety, that has value too. That's not something a spreadsheet can capture. So here's the shift I want you to consider. This isn't about finding the optimal strategy. It's about finding your strategy, the one that matches both your financial reality and your psychological reality. And your financial reality includes things like, what's your interest rate, actually? Because if you're sitting on a 7% mortgage from a few years ago, that math looks very different than a 3% mortgage. How stable is your income? If you work in a volatile industry, having a paid-off house might be worth way more to you than potential investment returns. Do you have an emergency fund? Because if you don't, neither of these should be your priority yet. But your psychological reality matters just as much. Can you handle risk? Can you watch your investments fluctuate without losing sleep? Does debt feel like a chain around your neck, or just a tool you're using strategically? I'll tell you something I rarely hear people admit. I know financially successful people who chose to pay off their mortgage even though the math said to invest. And they'll tell you it was the best decision they ever made, not because it maximized their net worth, but because it maximized their peace. I also know people who kept their low-interest mortgage and invested everything, and they're retiring years earlier than they would have otherwise. Both can be right. Both can be wrong. It depends entirely on the person living that life. So how do you actually think through this for yourself? Start by looking at your mortgage interest rate. If it's above 6%, you're probably better off prioritizing that payoff. The guaranteed return of eliminating high-interest debt is hard to beat, and the risk of investing instead becomes a lot harder to justify. Somewhere in between? That's personal territory. That's where you need to factor in your emergency fund, your job stability, your risk tolerance. And here's something practical that might help. You don't have to choose just one. You can split the difference. Put some toward the mortgage for that psychological win. Put some in investments for the growth potential. It might not be the most efficient mathematically, but if it helps you sleep better and still builds wealth, who cares? The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be consistent with something that actually works for your life. Look, here's what I want you to remember as you figure this out. Personal finance is called personal for a reason. Your mortgage, your savings, your goals, your tolerance for risk, your need for security, these are uniquely yours. And the decision that's right for you doesn't have to be the decision that's right for everyone else. Maybe you need the emotional freedom of a paid-off house more than you need maximum returns. That's okay. Maybe you need the wealth-building potential of investing more than you need to eliminate debt quickly. That's okay too. What matters is that you understand the trade-offs. You're honest with yourself about what you can actually handle, and you make a choice that moves you forward instead of keeping you paralyzed. Because that's the real trap here. Not making the wrong choice, but making no choice at all because you're too scared of getting it wrong. Progress beats perfection every single time. So take a breath, look at your numbers, think about what actually matters to you, and then make a decision you can live with. Not because it's what someone on the internet told you to do, but because it fits your life. You've got this.